Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. And I'm also delighted to join in adding my voice to this debate. I just wanted to get confirmation. How much time do I have? I have an entire 21 minutes. I will be sharing some of this time with my fellow MPPs, and I believe the MPP from Davenport will be sharing some time with me. Mr. Speaker, to me, it's very simple. If somebody is working 40 hours a week full-time, they ought to be able to have a decent standard of living. They ought not to have to go to a food bank to feed their family. It's as simple as that. If somebody is working full-time in Ontario, do we want an Ontario where somebody is working full-time, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and still have to rely on a food bank to put food on the table for their families? And I think we can all agree that that's not the kind of Ontario we want to live in. And that's why we have raised the minimum wage first to $14 this past January 1st, 2018, and we will be raising it further to $15 an hour January 1st, 2019. And I have to say that of all of the things that we in government have done, there are many, many things that I'm very proud of. But this one is particularly something that I feel strongly about. And I also understand that, that small businesses, we need to make sure that this transition is fair to them, and that is why we came up with a robust small business package that includes reducing the small business tax by 1%. And there's much more that we are doing, including, I know, incentives for some small businesses who hire youth workers, for instance. The Ontario government will be providing them with a subsidy. We have eliminated the capital gains tax, and we're making massive investments to ensure Ontario's workforce remains highly skilled. One of the knocks that the Conservative Party sometimes makes is brings Ontario down by saying that Ontario is not a competitive place to do business in, but all of the evidence shows that's not the case. In fact, as it turns out, 3 out of the 5 top cities in North America to do business in happen to be in Ontario, business-friendly places. So actually, the Ontario PC Party may not think that Ontario is a competitive place to do business in, but it turns out that the rest of the world does think that Ontario is a very competitive place to do business in, and we will continue to advocate for that. I also just wanted to say that often the debate on the minimum wage centers on that hourly wage increase, but along with it, we've made some very critical changes. One of the ones that I think is really good is that if somebody works for 5 years for one employer, they're entitled to 3 weeks vacation instead of the usual 2 weeks. And I think we can all agree that that is something that is really important for work-life balance. We spend a significant amount of our working lives working, but I think it's really, really important that we be able to take some time off to enjoy the fruits of our labor. And so the 3 weeks vacation, I believe, is very welcome. I know we've all traveled, and in many parts of the world, particularly in Europe, 4 or 5 weeks is the norm. And when you consider the fact that it's a 52-week year, 3 weeks is not an unreasonable amount of time. So that is another one that I'm very supportive of. We've also said that equal pay for equal work. So if somebody who's doing a part-time job is doing exactly the same thing as somebody who's doing a full-time job, I think fairness would suggest that the hourly wage be the same. Obviously, the take-home pay would be different because somebody's working fewer hours than full-time, but there's no reason the hourly wage ought to be different if they're doing, the same job. So these are some of the other changes that I think get lost in the debate around minimum wage, but we've done a lot to improve and protect Ontario's workers. As they say, you get what you pay for. And quality shouldn't cost more in the long run. I think we can all agree that quality really shouldn't cost us more in the long run, and we get what we pay for. And so if we pay our employees well, then we get good quality, which in the long run is actually cheaper than lower quality. And so there are so many different reasons to pay the minimum wage. There's a good business case to be made. But I think, to me, the most heartening thing is the human story. I mean, what is the point of growing our economy? What is the point of making our province richer if that wealth is not going to be shared? I mean, is Ontario a better place if our GDP increases, but most of that increase goes to a select few places? Or is Ontario a better place if our GDP increases and that increase in wealth is more broadly shared? And I think as Liberals, we do believe that a rising tide should lift all boats, not just some boats. And that is the spirit behind raising the minimum wage. It's a small way of saying that those who are the most vulnerable, those who are often doing the jobs that many of us may not want to do, that they ought to get a little bit of the rising tide, that their boats, their standards of living should also rise. And I have met many of my residents. I've knocked on many doors over the past few months, often in high-rise buildings because the weather's cold, so high-rise buildings is a good place to be knocking on doors. And I have yet to meet somebody in these buildings that has said, oh, I'm opposed to the minimum wage. It's not that everybody there is making a minimum wage. Many are making more than the minimum wage, but they understand how hard it is in today's Toronto, in today's Mississauga, to live on $11.60 an hour. It's just not possible. And so we've made a good start. I'm very proud of this. And I'm a little disappointed that, all of the leadership candidates in the PC race are saying that they're going to hold off on raising the minimum wage to $15 on January 1st, 2019. And I have to ask why. Why would you deny the most vulnerable of Ontarians the dignity that should come with working full-time? If you're working 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, why would you deny these people the dignity of not being forced to go to a food bank to put food on the table? That's the simple question you have to ask yourself. Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the vast majority of Ontarians or not? And there are ways to balance, because I understand that there are many stakeholders in the as we raise the $15 minimum wage, and there are ways to balance the needs and concerns of all of the stakeholders. But why would you deny a raise to the poorest of the poor? And my only question to the PC party would be, well, if you're going to say that somehow Ontario should not increase the minimum wage, would you say the same for all of the CEOs in Ontario? Would you say that you're against a raise for all of the CEOs in the year 2019? Well, say that, because I've never heard any of you say that. All of you come out and say that you will be against raising the minimum wage. But if it comes to the rich, oh, a 300% increase to a CEO salary, not a problem. I've never heard.
I'd ask the House to come to order so that I can hear the member who has the floor.
Thank you, Speaker. That's really interesting that when it comes to the richest of the rich, there is no protest when their wages, their salaries increase. But somebody who's making $14 an hour, oh my goodness, the world's going to come down if we increase their wages. I think that's something that we all need to ask ourselves. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to be supporting the minimum wage, and now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, the member from Davenport. Thank you.